Been quite an endeavor. We took down the broken pieces and put everything, tombstones all back up. It looks really good. We're not going to landscape it. We want it natural, but we will be doing a lot of planting and cleaning. So if anybody gets froggy and wants to come help us, just come right on.
How many graves are there, Carol?
How many graves? We know there are 8, but there's 8 with tombstones. There's several with bricks that have a family's name, like Stevens. We don't know who or where. Winifred Gurley has a book with all the names listed and everything, but Calvin Ward, Senior or Junior? Senior is buried there. And others too. But anyway.
Is that the man that did Ward's history? Is that where he's buried?
Brother.
Nephew would be his nephew.
Nephew. Anyway, we'll be doing that, and then next month at History at High Noon, Chris Adams is coming to talk to us about heritage agriculture, the original seeds that the wiregrass farmers and all brought, as well as their animals. And then you got me in May, I'm sorry. We'll be doing a history on women that did it. I'm not going to tell you what they did yet, but that's our exhibit, and that's what we're going to talk about in May. Okay, today I have the privilege, through his son, I finally got him here to talk. Where'd he go? He's hiding from me. There he is. David Lott's going to tell us all about Lott Builders. Welcome you, please.
Well, thank y'all for having me. I'm going to go a little further back in Lott Builders and basically start talking a little bit about the Lott family and the history of them and how they ended up with Coffee County. And then I'll quickly work into the Lott Builders. We originally came. The rumor is we originally came from Russia. Spelled our last name L-O-T-Z, and it gets estimated in the 1500s, 14 to 1500s. We left Russia probably for political persecution or for some reason. We left Russia, migrated to England. When we got to England, we changed our name to L-O-T-T-E, Lott, from L-O-T-Z, and there, we probably did that in an effort to hide our Russian heritage because we were probably a second-class citizen there, migrating from Russia. And we later dropped the E and went to L-O-T-T. That was just a better way to be less confusing to pronounce. I'm not sure when we came to this country. There's conflicting stories about which generation got here first. We probably were a debtor. We probably owed money, and one way you could clear that debt up is get on a boat and go to the Americas, because there was a race for this country over here, and between France and Spain and England, and the more people they had, the better off they'd be in protecting their property. And so we ended up coming over here from England. We were settled in the London area. The first person that I feel like may have been our first person to come from England over here his name was John the Immigrant Lott. He had a nickname, the Immigrant. And he was born in 1590 in the London area. And another indication that he might have been on the boat over here was because there's no record of his death. In England, if you died in England, they would probably had some record of that. But since you came to America, a lot of that was lost just by not able to keep up with people that got here and passed away. He brought with him his son, who was William the Immigrant Lott, and they both had the nickname Immigrant, and he was born in 1626, so I'm guessing they came here around, probably right around his birthday, around 1640, 1650 maybe. The second generation here was John Lott, and he was born in 1663, and he was the first person born in America. He married a Johanna Medhurst, and all these people lived at this time in the Virginia area, which is where most of the English settlers came. There's no record of any of these deaths. We just have records of their birth date. John his oldest son was John Aaron Lott, and he was born in Virginia, and he married Emily Spencer Lott, and they left Virginia and moved to, I'm not sure about the direction they went, but they ended up living in North Carolina the final days, but they spent most of their time in to Biggie, which is in Alabama, southern Alabama. They were just most of these people were just following free land. You know, if you moved to a certain area and they needed a population there, the government give you land, 200 acres minimum usually. Aaron Lott had his first oldest son was John Aaron Lott II, and he lived in Florida, or what was called Alabama, southern Alabama, and he was born in 1720, and then he moved to the Carolinas. He died in 1795, but my guess is he was in middle 1700s. He was living, or late 1700s. He was living in North Carolina. He had 9 children. They were all boys, not a single girl, and between them they had 60 grandchildren. And his oldest son, John Aaron Lott III, he was born and raised in North Carolina, and he married a girl from Douglas, Sarah Ann Lightfoot, and they had 10 children and 75 grandchildren. And one of their middle sons was Mark Lott. Mark Lott was the first Lott to visit and come to Coffee County, and they came basically from Statesboro area. Mark Lott had 10 children, and his oldest child was Daniel Lott. Now, Daniel Lott is the first actual full-time resident of Coffee County, and he lived in in a community called Shepherd, and I guess he was probably a founding member of Shepherd, and which is basically where Long Hill Church is now, in that general area. He located there because it was good grazing land, and it had a beaver dam on it, and it was a place he could get some property and start up his farm.
What year was that, David?
Daniel Lott was born in 1791. I'm thinking that somewhere around, so add about 30 years to that, that would be 20 years, so I'd say 1810, somewhere around in that area. Daniel Lott had 10 children. I'm sorry, Mark Lott had 10 children, the oldest being Daniel Lott. And Daniel Lott he became a prominent citizen in Coffee County. He was, his house was basically the voting center for a precinct in Telfair County at that time. So we were part of his area of Coffee County was part of Telfair County. He was born in 1791, as I said, married. His first wife he had 3 wives. First wife was Lucy Peterson, and they had 10 children by his first wife. And then his second wife was Katie Bowen Carver, and they had 5 children by that wife. And his third wife was Frances Fanny Gaskins, which is my great-great-grandmother. They had 5 children, all boys, by Ms. Gaskins. And so he ended up with 20 kids. He had 20 children. My great-granddaddy was the last child that he had. He was born in the middle of the Civil War, and his name was James Seward Lott. Shepherd was the center of activity in Coffee County at the time. And they wanted to build, in 1854, I believe it was, the legislature designated Coffee County as its own county. And so, and most of these transactions were done out of Daniel's house. And so they asked Daniel to give a piece of property to build the courthouse, and he refused to do that. He'd gotten in some trouble, or the family had gotten a little bit of trouble, I think, in either North Carolina or Alabama, and we were staying away from the law as best we could. And so he recommended that Henry Peterson give him some land. Well, Henry Peterson lived over here in Douglas, in this Douglas community. And so by that one act, Douglas became the county seat for Coffee County. His house did serve as a temporary courthouse until they built a new courthouse. And he was basically a county commissioner. And so he was a fairly prominent person in the county. Now, my great-granddaddy, Seward Lott, took over the family farm operation for years. He lived up at Long Hill Church. And he was married twice. He was married to William Lilly Johnson, and my great grandmother would have been Sally Lou Lott. He farmed for a good bit of his life, for probably I'd say half of his life, and then he moved to Douglas and got into his main occupation was selling horses and mules and buggies. That's what he did for a living. He lived over here on Ward Street, right by the West Ward Street Church of God, right there. And he had a large mule and horse stable, which is the old Lott Builders warehouse, the old Lott Builders store. I got an ad later in here somewhere that said, he just gotten in a fresh load of mules and mares, fresh stock from Kentucky, low prices, and the horse were behind the infirmary, which was located in the apartment building, what I always known as the apartment building, and his office was in the Union Bank building, which is now the Coffee County Bank, now Varnador building. It's on the 3rd floor. Now, in addition to having just selling mules and horses and buggies, things of this nature, he also had a little hardware business going along with it. He sold paint, he sold nails and things of this nature, but he never really did it in heavy into building materials. And so he gravitated to that. My great granddaddy gravitated to that because, as you could see at the turn of the century, the horses and buggies started going away, and with the invention of the automobile. And so he recognized that his business was going to be short-lived. So he started gravitating to the building supply business, and he had an ad he ran in 1911 about selling building materials. And this funny thing is the stuff he was selling, nobody uses today. It was plaster and lime and window sashes. My granddad, Clinton Lott Sr., took over the business. He was born in 1899, and he took over the business and called the name Lott Builder Supply Company. He labeled his business Lott Builder Supply Company, and that was in 1921. And he had I guess what you'd call a half-nephew, Joe Fillingham, was his original partner. Joe lived behind the Methodist church. He was a great man, a part-time minister, but he was the son of one of Granddad's half-brothers. He lived behind the Methodist church, and those were the first two employees of Lott Building Supply Company. They would only be open for a half a day. And what they do is they'd open in the mornings, and then they'd make deliveries in the afternoon, and they'd lock the doors. And they did it by horse and buggy, initially. After a few years, they bought a solid tire delivery truck and started making deliveries with motorized vehicles. Then he brought on two other partners. He brought in Mr. Howell Cross, well actually, two other partners, Howell Cross, and he brought in Mr. Earl Rickerson. Mr. Cross lives where Action Area is, that's where he lived. And Mr. Rickerson lived over here on Jackson Street in College. And those three people really ran the company. I mean, my granddad had other interests that he was. He's a charter member of the Coffee County Bank, and he was a charter member of the Farmers Bank. And so he had a lot of interest in that. And but we initially were in the farm and implement business. That was our main business. We actually had a line of tractors we sold. My grandfather had developed a real close relationship to U.S. Steel, and through their Birmingham division, he'd have the president of U.S. Steel in Birmingham come over and hunt birds with him, and we could get steel products, and they were all on allocation. I mean, galvanized roofing, wire fence was in such demand now because of the laws with fencing in your livestock, plow points, all, and we were just coming off World War I, and so it's real difficult to get steel building products, steel products of any kind. So that really gave us a boost because people would come from hundreds of miles away to get field fence. We took on a line of tractors, and that probably ended our farming direction. The line was made by the people who made the plow points that we bought, and they shut that down. And by then, we had a chance to get the Massey Ferguson line, but we had chose this other tractor line. And by the time we realized we'd made a mistake, we couldn't. All the major tractor dealerships had been taken, and so we were just basically out of luck in the tractor business. And so we gravitated more and more to the building supply area. And as that grew, my dad came back to the business in 1950, maybe 1950. He graduated from the University of Georgia. And when he came back, we put in a ready-mix concrete plant and got into that business. The ready-mix plant was located over here on the Georgia-Florida Railroad because we had to get the sand and gravel in by rail. And it was located kind of right behind where the police station is now. And we had a trestle there that we just brought in these cars, and they just dumped the sand and the gravel up under the railroad track, and we could scoop it out with a front end loader. It wasn't the safest way to do business, but that's the way we did it. And we were fortunate. We had a couple of rail cars fall off that trestle. And then we got, my uncle came back to the business in about 1964. He graduated from Georgia Tech. He would have been he would have probably been lifelong in the military if he had been able to continue his flying career. But he came back, he graduated from Tech in architectural school, and never bothered to get his license. And because he wanted to do other things, particularly fly airplanes. And so I came back to the business in 1973, and later on we put in a truss plant that Clay manages, and I think we put that in about 1985. We serviced about a 50 or 60 mile radius effectively, and Coffee County's been good for us. We've been in this county for 250 years. I think it's been a great place to grow up and have a family, and and I hope we can continue to operate Lott Building Supply Company. We just passed our 100-year anniversary a couple of years ago, So under the name Lott Builders, we've been open over 100 years. The success rate of a family business making it 100 years is 3%. 3 out of 100 may make it to 100 years. There's only 2 or 3 businesses left in town that are over 100 years old. The one that comes to mind, which is still a family business, is Sims Funeral Home. It's over 100 years, and it's always been owned by the Sims family. And the Douglas Enterprise is over 100 years. Now that, to me, that's got about 5 different ownerships, and they even owned by somebody in Coffee County now. So, and the only other one I know that's 100 years old is R.W. Griffin, and they were founded the exact same year we were, by Mr. Griffin. Yeah. So I was out here earlier looking through some of the stuff, and I actually picked up a yearbook, 1955, and I thumbed through it. And I think we were the only ad in there that I could recognize the business was still in business. So, we got a lot of interesting stuff here. The problem is I missed some of these pictures. But I hope I've shed some information to you. Hope you've enjoyed it. We've been real lucky, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
David, maybe you can comment on this facility or two. You brought in
Okay.
a picture for us to look at.
Now this was a rendering done by the architect when we built our building. We built this building in 1973, actually 50 years ago. So right in the middle of our history, we moved from our location right over here to south. Huh?
That location.
From that location to this location, we moved here in 1973, right when I got out of Georgia Tech, and we've been there ever since. This is a painting my Francis's first wife did, Judy Lott, of our concrete plant, and you can see the roof trestle there. I mean the train trestle how we dropped the sand up under the tracks and loaded it in. This was a conveyor that brought the sand up higher. This was a cement solid. We could do, on a good day, we could do 60 yards a day. That was a good day. The plants we have now can do 120 yards an hour. But that was a good day for 60 yards in a whole day. That was a 12-hour day. This is our original facility. The front of this had been done later, but as you can see, this was also another painting Judy Lott did, and this was kind of typical. Right across the street was the fire station, and the police station was located right across the street from Lott Builders. They were in the same building, and they'd always be sitting. I mean, any time of day you go out there, and they'd be sitting in rocking chairs most of the time, and so it kind of was a gathering place. And we would have, these are 2 painters sitting out front from an actual picture waiting to come in before we opened the store. But we were kind of a gossip center for the area. I've got a picture this is a picture I'll quickly show you. This is a picture where advertised, this is 1924. We were Lott Builders then, but we still sold buggies. We still would sell buggies. When I came to work at Lott Builders, we still had yokes for horses, and we had bridles, and we had some old mule plow points that we still sold. And every now and then I'll have somebody call me up and say they saw a Lott Builders buggy at some location. I've got a picture of our old family. This is a picture I don't really know much about. This is my granddad, and he was, I guess, either the coach or the assistant coach of this baseball team. And one thing I noticed about it was there was a fan sitting up here above it and had a Lott Builders mail apron on. I'm thinking this is late 30s, maybe. I do not remember a lot of these things had 77, I do not remember a telephone number 77. I remember an 800 telephone, but I don't remember a number 70, the number being 77. This was a picture of all the people that worked in the store, and this was during our centennial, I think, which was in 1954. And everybody grew a beard, everybody dressed up the part with a little tie on. I can remember that time, because I remember my granddaddy had that beard on us, and I always thought he needed to get rid of that thing. I've got just some pictures, some old ads we did.
We got there's still a structure left from the old building that's right over here. You can still see Lott Builder Supply on that. What part of it?
That was our warehouse. It was over here on Jackson Street. And of course, that was still on, that was on the Georgia-Florida Railroad line, and we depended on that. Okay? And so we outgrew our facility over here in Columbia, and we needed an additional warehouse. So if you went into the store and you bought, you get all your hardware, nails and stuff like that, but if you needed roofing or lumber or something like that, you had to get in your truck, you had to get you a loadout ticket and had to drive over here to Jackson Street and see Mr. Crowder was running it when I first came back. See Mr. Crowder, and they'd load you up that material over there. So you really had to but that was our, we just didn't have enough room where we were. We put that in, I think, late 40s.
David, who did your granddad, where you grew up and your granddad built the home out here, whose property was that? Was that part of the Ashley estate or?
I couldn't tell you. I know, my great granddaddy Seward lived right here on Ward Street.
Yeah.
And they owned, I don't know whether he owned, but most of the property from, let's see, it would be east of Chester Avenue, coming this way, north of probably the railroad track. And I'm thinking almost all the way to Walker Street. I think my granddad owned all that property. I've always had people, everybody just about who built a house in that area bought the lot from my granddad. I've had story after story. I remember Miss Sears telling me one time that she bought the last lot that granddaddy had over on, it was at, I guess, Jackson and Letitia, I guess, and said somebody had been trying to buy a lot, I forget what she said, and he came to her and said, how much did Mr. Lott sell you that lot for? And she told him, and he said, you're lying to me. And he said, why? He said, I'm not lying to you. So I bought him twice that for that lot. He wouldn't sell it to me.
Well, I know that was all part of the Peterson originally. It was Letitia was that all or whatever. And of course, that went all the way over to where the hospital is. All that was Peterson land. I know Mr. Ashley, had his farm at Upton. Of course, it came into Douglas. Mr. Coffey, where Coffey's living, Mr. Coffey ran the farms for Mr. Ashley. So that's how I think they got hold of that. But, that joins where y'all were. I was just curious if that was on Peterson land or Coffey or, that's because that's a pretty big tract of land.
Yeah, I really hadn't done I do know, I did some research on Lott Builders with the issue I have with DOT. And Seward my great granddaddy Seward owned a bunch of property.
So that's probably where it came from.
And I don't know that my granddad didn't inherit it from Seward.
Yeah.
He owned all that property where the DOT property is now.
Yeah, Walker there.
Yep. And he actually sold that, I think, to a Kirkland, and they went bankrupt. And he bought the property back on the courthouse square. And a couple of years later, the Kirklands got back on their feet, and he sold it back to them for what he paid for it in the courthouse square.
So where y'all actually moved the new store to, y'all had been in the family for years, right?
It was a joint ownership between us and Mr. Brooks. They owned 50, we bought out their interest in that property with Mr. Brooks. and still own some property with,
Yeah, the corner down there, y'all still have that.
yeah, and on both sides of Chester.
Anybody else got a question?
The Lott hardwares and all, they were what, brothers or cousins?
Cousins, distant relatives, yes, sir, you know, Daniel Lott had 20 youngins.
Yeah.
Okay, and, you know, and so it's hard to, you know, we probably all came from, 90% of us are descendants of Daniel Lott through one of those children.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's the Broxton Lotts, which I think is, and then you got the Nichols Lotts, and you got the Waycross Lotts. So, you know, there was just too much, there were just too many lots in a small area.
Lot of lots.
Yeah, and so we had.
Hey, you know, there are so many immigrants from Russia who were of Jewish heritage. Do you have any idea if y'all came from?
I couldn't tell you. You know, we've always been mostly, you know, our religion's been mostly Methodist growing up,
Yeah.
and even prior to, but that could have certainly been influenced by the women we married, because we weren't very religious. we had a history of drinking and getting married and having young ones. That's about the only thing we could do good. But like I say, we've been here at least 250 years, and it's really been good for our family.
Y'all be good to us.
Sure have.
Thank you so much, David, I appreciate it so much, you don't know how much.
Well, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it.
We enjoy
Very
it.
good. Y'all get up and look at everything, get you a little bite to eat or drink.
Yeah, we have.
And those that don't know, Carol does a great job archiving this. Johnny's in the hospital in Emory.